Mr. President, I do want to get right to the news of this week.
Sure.
The terrorism in Boston.
Yeah.
Many people have wondered if it took you right back to 9/11 when you heard it.
Well, at first, you know, I was deeply concerned that there might have been a organized plot. I don't know all the facts. I don't think we all know all the facts, but I was deeply concerned that this could have been, you know, another organized, highly organized attack on the country. And it still may be. Again, I don't know the facts, but I do know that it's really hard to protect the homeland.
FBI report implicates Saudi government in 9/11, says, but we can't afford to irritate the Saudis by actually looking into who backed 9/11, especially with oil prices going up now. Contrary to the official narrative, 9/11 was state-sponsored terror. The only question is which state sponsored it. The 9/11 commissioner and co-chair of the Congressional Inquiry into 9/11 says in a sworn declaration that the Saudi government is linked to the 9/11 attacks. It says this week the Miami Herald provided more evidence of a Saudi link. A Saudi family who fled their Sarasota home area, it says here, area home weeks before 9/11 had many connections to individuals associated with terrorist attacks on 9/11, according to newly released FBI records. Let's not forget the other state that sponsored the 9/11 terrorist attacks. The 5 dancing Israelis arrested on 9/11. A Mossad surveillance team made quite a public spectacle of themselves on 9/11. New York Times reported Thursday that a group of 5 men had set up video cameras aimed at the Twin Towers prior to the attack on Tuesday were seen congratulating one another afterwards. It says here, police received several calls from angry New Jersey residents claiming Middle Eastern men with a white van were videotaping the disaster with shouts of joy and mockery. So there's all kinds of hoopla about them being Palestinians and Arabs. When a van fitting that exact description was stopped just before crossing into New York, the suspicious Middle Easterns were apprehended, and imagine the surprise of the police officers when these terror suspects turned out to be Israelis. According to ABC's 2020, when the van belonging to the cheering Israelis was stopped by the police, the driver of the van told officers, "We are Israelis. We are not your problem. Your problems are our problems. The Palestinians are your problem." So just remember that in the future for this video when we get to it about one of Alex Jones's or the InfoWarrior reporters getting bashed by a Boston night. Journalist, with state-sponsored terror, an inside attack, or was it an inside attack or was it an outside attack? Journalist Carl Bernstein tells Joe Scarborough Jewish neocons responsible in part for Iraq war. Controversial journalist Carl Bernstein told MSNBC Joe Scarborough Friday that the insane Iraq war was brought to bear by Bush, Cheney, and the Jewish neocons who wanted to remake the world. They then justified his barb about Jews by saying that since he himself is Jewish, maybe I can say that. Well, I don't think so, Carl. You'll probably get bashed by them. For his part, the Morning Joe host noted that some might accuse Bernstein of suffering from the Bush derangement syndrome. It says here that the Morning Joe host said it would be much worse if a Southern Baptist said that, but I think actually some would accuse you of Bush derangement syndrome there. There was a grand conspiracy of neocons, and you said Jewish neocons, that they somehow went to war on a pretext for the state of Israel. 9/11 debris not part of plane's landing gear. It's actually from a portion of the wing. Boeing today expressed its confidence. Good old advertisements like to break my concentration. It says here, Boeing today expressed its confidence that a piece of aircraft found sandwiched between the 2 lower Manhattan buildings did indeed come from one of the 9/11 planes, though a rep for the company told the NYPD that Boeing could not determine which one. They said the 5-foot by 3-foot piece is not part of the landing gear as previously reported. It's actually a portion of the underside of the wing known as the trailing edge flap. And while some raised the possibility over the weekend that the debris was placed there on purpose, a rep for the NYPD said there's no evidence that that was the case. They said it will be moved to a secure location this week. That's right. They were like treating it as a crime scene. That's what they said publicly, quarantining everything off. So post 9/11 domestic security spending exceeds cost of the New Deal. Video surveillance is already big business, and it says in the aftermath of the Boston Marathon bombings, expected to get even bigger. In response to security concerns, post 9/11 Americans witnessed the growth of a massive domestic security apparatus fueled by federal, money. So it says post 9/11 federal spending on Homeland Security exceeds $790 billion. That's larger than TARP, and when adjusted for inflation, the New Deal. The post-9/11 investment legacy is apparent in the near ubiquitous presence of law enforcement CCTV cameras. For instance, New York City has more than 4,000 cameras in Manhattan alone. It says here Chicago's linked public and private security cameras number around 10,000. That's what I was telling you before, like 3 years ago when I was there. Man, that was bad. And of course, you have London as well. Yeah, see, in London, the Xanadu of winking digital eye surveillance cameras total an estimated 500,000. But based on international comparisons, there's still a lot of room for U.S. surveillance to grow. Americans troubled more by government abuse than terrorism. So new polling numbers suggest U.S. citizens are on average more afraid of their government than the threat of another terrorist attack. Even after a pair of bombings in Boston 2 weeks ago injured hundreds, more Americans say they're unwilling to sacrifice constitutional liberties for security than those that are. Not only are Americans more opposed now to giving up personal freedoms for the sake of security than they were after 9/11, but other statistics show that the distrust against the federal government continues to climb. You're more likely to die from brain-eating parasites, alcoholism, obesity, medical errors, risky sexual behavior, or just about anything other than terrorism. You are 17,000 times more likely to die from heart disease than a terrorist attack, 12,000 times more likely to die from cancer than a terrorist attack, 11,000 times more likely to die in an airplane accident than from a terrorist attack. The U.S. State Department reports that only 17 U.S. citizens were killed worldwide as a result of terrorism in 2011. The figure includes deaths in Afghanistan, Iraq, and all other theaters of war. Obesity is 5,800 times to 23,000 times more likely to kill you than a terrorist. Williams-Sonoma released a statement apologizing for pulling pressure cookers. So it says here, Right Views reported that the home goods retailer Williams-Sonoma pulled pressure cookers from shelves in some of their stores out of respect for the victims of the Boston Marathon bombing. So it goes on and it says that pressure cookers are available at all stores nationwide. It says here the decision was made to remove pressure cookers after the bombings. It says we apologize if we offended anyone by this act. In New York City, this Boro bike tour says here is facing tight security in the wake of Boston Marathon bombings. According to various reports, the 32,000 racers will not be allowed backpacks, hydration packs, saddlebags at the next Sunday's tours. They are permitted to wear small fanny packs, bring water bottles, and bring bike frame bags. Checkpoints along the route will be strictly enforced, and confiscated items will not be returned. Police Commissioner Ray Kelly said the city is reevaluating security protocol for major events, so there's not enough security there. Supreme Court says Virginia can block out-of-state use of its FOIA. The Supreme Court ruled Monday that it's legal for the state to limit the use of Freedom of Information Act to its own residents. The Department of Justice granted immunity to companies participating in the NSA surveillance program. In other words, the ISP, your internet service provider, really is your internet surveillance provider. So it says here that the DOJ agreed to issue 2,511 letters immunizing AT&T and other companies participating in a cybersecurity program from criminal prosecution under the Wiretap Act, according to new documents obtained by the Electronic Privacy Information Center. So basically, the Obama regime has secretly authorized the interception of communications carried on portions of networks operated by AT&T and other ISPs. So it's a practice that might otherwise be illegal under federal wiretapping laws. So the executive director of the Electronic Privacy Information Center was quoted as saying that the Justice Department is helping private companies evade federal wiretap laws. Also, it says here alarm bells should be going off at this. Spy or pay up. FBI-backed bill would fine U.S. firms for refusing wiretaps. U.S. government task force is drafting an FBI-backed legislation that would penalize companies like Google and Facebook for refusing to comply with wiretaps orders. So, judge tells FBI they can't use webcams to spy on people. A judge in Texas has told the FBI that they cannot install sophisticated surveillance software on a suspect's computer in order to spy on them. It says a request by the FBI came in a case involving federal bank fraud and identity theft, as the FBI had no idea where the suspect was, so they wanted to basically install software on the computer to find them. So next time you start to think that it's your personal computer, your own private computer, it says here that the FBI request basically showed that once installed, the software has a capacity to search the computer's hard drive, the RAM, and other storage media to activate the computer's built-in camera to generate latitude and longitude coordinates for the computer's location and to transmit the extracted data to FBI agents. After Boston, spending on video surveillance expected to surge. So everything after Boston, post 9/11, video surveillance, a market already on an upward trajectory, is expected to receive a big boost in spending following the bombings in Boston. It's all business. Great Boston man confronts shit-heel Alex Jones reporter over false claims. So you can go in there and watch the video. But a reporter from Alex Jones' InfoWars website found himself being verbally destroyed by a resident on the streets of Boston who claims that the recent bombings have been a result of a so-called false flag operation carried out by the U.S. government. So this is what you need to remember. Remember, like, the Israeli doctors were there over this, the second suspect that was alive, that survived the hail of bullets and that was unarmed and can't speak. The doctors were, Israeli doctors were there on his side. And of course, what? They had Israelis in Israel that were going to help carry out the investigation. And it would be kind of ironic if they were kind of behind this, because it did embolden them. We covered this last week in an article, that these bombings helped Israel, much like 9/11, where we went to Iraq, Afghanistan, and everything else. That's why I'm a little apprehensive about InfoWars and stuff like that. They put out some really good information. There's a lot of good-hearted people there, and they try to steer away from Israel or anything about that side. So what kind of gets me is that me and all these other people put all this time and work in and getting this information out and pointing people towards who's the possible culprit here, who we think the culprit is. And it's not just an inside job U.S. government. It's a very bland term. It's nice when you first get into the whole 9/11 conspiracy thing, but you start to realize, oh, Israel, Saudi Arabia, you know what I mean? So whether this guy is this dude that was going all crazy and stuff like that, this quote Bostonian, whether he was a provocateur, or some kind of whatever agent or not, the fact is that when they go around telling people, oh, your government's this, your government's that, then what? Then they start to get pissed off. I mean, they still have a lot of programming, state-sponsored programming in them to back the government, no matter what. The government couldn't do something like that. Well, they could do it, but for whatever it's worth, they don't like to hear that, So as far as PSYOPs go, I think that, besides engineering the 10% for the revolution, as far as InfoWars and alternative media and right-wing people go, it's also to discredit people like myself. This guy was saying at the tail end of one quote, and what you say is dangerous, and people like you shouldn't be able to drive a car, much less espouse your opinions in public. So yes, but we have a First Amendment. We've got to protect it. But you're an a-hole, and so is Alex Jones. So when you say that, he's the authority, like the NRA for gun owners, kind of control opposition. Alex Jones is the authority for anybody that is dissenting or skeptic about the official name. Boston bomber's uncle married daughter of top CIA official. The uncle of the two suspected Boston bombers in last week's attack, Mr. Ruslan Tsarnaev, was married to the daughter of former top CIA official Graham Fuller. So this comes after we were just talking about that Georgian-based organization that's staunchly anti-Russian and linked to the CIA along with Brzezinski, and that these individuals had visited. Actually, the older brother had visited them and been trained. James Tucker, Bilderberg hound, dies at 78. He passed away yesterday due to complications he suffered following a fall. So it's bad news for alternative media. And they say suffering a fall. Now, I know my first landlord died when she broke her hip from a fall, and she never recovered and died. So, but you never know, right? American Free Press, UK Bilderberg 2013 meeting confirmed. This is from April 24th. Received an email from a staffer that confirming that the Bilderberg 2013 will be going down near Watford in the UK from June 6th to June 9th, so he won't be able to make it. 5 doctors jailed in Kosovo for illegal organ harvesting and transplants. Ah, look at that, 5 doctors. The recipients were mainly Israelis. The indictment names Israeli national as the mastermind of the network for recruiting donors and finding recipients, while the Turkish doctor was performing the organ removal. NGO ranks Israel low on marriage freedom. mostly because of the jurisdiction of religious authorities in Israel over marriage, which makes it impossible for a Jew to marry a non-Jew.